What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, you've heard him for a majority of the summer, Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com's columnist, is back. And of course, the one, the only, Chris Fedor, cleveland.com's Cavs beat reporter, is back on the mic after a much-deserved PTO break to begin September. But we had to bring him back after Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson had their preseason press conference at Cleveland Clinic Courts today, and there was some news being shared. As we know, Darius Garland is back on the court doing some basketball activities, but he is going to be in a limited capacity when it comes to training camp next week. And Chris and Jimmy, as we mentioned when the first press release came out for Darius Garland's toe injury, there was some speculation about what Darius Garland's involvement would be come training camp time. Chris, what do you think about the update that we got from Kenny and Koby today and what it says about the likelihood that Darius Garland is going to be available or unavailable for the beginning of the season for the Cavs?
Well, now that Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow is having surgery for turf toe, maybe people will have a better understanding of just how significant the injury was for Darius and how difficult it was for him to play through it and how painful it can be and how much it can linger and how long the recovery process is and all that kind of stuff. I think this just reaffirms all of that. It is a long road to recovery for Darius. It is a tricky injury that he's coming back from. There are a lot of steps that he's going to have to take before he's ready to be full go and before he's ready to play in a meaningful NBA regular season game. It's not surprising to me. President of Basketball Operations Koby Altman used the term very limited when it comes to training camp and Darius's participation. It's not surprising to me that he's going to be very limited when it comes to this because one, like I said, it's a tricky injury, and two, the Cavs have historically taken their time when it comes to these injuries. They don't want to rush these guys back. They have a bigger picture goal in mind. It's not about Darius Garland being 100% or being healthy and effective in November and December. It's about him being ready for what they hope is a trip into June. Everything that I continue to hear on Darius is that the Cavs are going to be cautious about this, that he is going to be very, very limited when it comes to training camp. There is going to be a ramp-up process that involves his conditioning, and he's probably going to have to figure out what kind of insert he's going to put in his shoe to protect his toe and how he's going to play through it and all that kind of stuff. So, as I've said on this podcast, and I think I've written it for cleveland.com, I would not be surprised if we don't see Darius Garland until around Thanksgiving or maybe the beginning of December.
Yeah, and I think that's significant, right? Because obviously there's been, again, speculation of when Darius Garland would return. But obviously, as we get these more nuances in Darius Garland's going to be in attendance at IMG Academy next week, which is a good sign, but not necessarily what we wanted to hear for this Cavs guard, especially after talking with Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson today and how significantly they felt the loss of Darius Garland during the playoff series against the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Koby Altman referenced it multiple times, especially when it comes to the ball handling and the attack-minded defense that the Pacers were playing 94 feet against them. And that's something that we've covered on this podcast at length. But Jimmy, I wanted to ask you what you took away from today's press conference. What caught your eye? Because I have a couple things in mind, but I want to get into what you guys had in mind first.
I think there are a couple of things, but I think the first thing for me, that the big takeaway that I had, guys, is that when it comes to their evaluation of this roster and how they felt about everything that happened to them last year, including the loss in the Eastern Conference semifinals against Indiana, I think they feel like there are minor tweaks that they need to make, both with the roster, and they did that, and with their style of play. But I think the way that Kenny Atkinson phrased it with me in a one-on-one when we talked at Darius's celebrity softball game, and the way that he phrased it again today, is that they're not going to reinvent this thing. They believe in this roster. They believe in this coaching staff. They believe in their play style. and they believe in their chances of competing in the Eastern Conference. And they believe that they don't have to do drastic things in order to reach the ultimate goal, which is getting to the NBA Finals and winning an NBA championship. We'll see. We'll see if they were right about that. We'll see if their approach was the right one. We'll see about how much better some of these teams in the Eastern Conference got this offseason. But it's clear that their mindset is, we're good. Like, we didn't play our best against Indiana. We had some flaws that showed up against Indiana. Kudos to them for their run. But just because we didn't get the outcome that we wanted last year, it doesn't mean that our process is broken. It doesn't mean that we have to overhaul our roster. And it doesn't mean that we have to act out of desperation. We have to be aggressive. We have to be honest about our own flaws. But we don't have to make these drastic changes, both from a personnel standpoint, from a lineup construction standpoint, and from a play style standpoint.
My main takeaway was that, I guess, the defensive identity starts with the microphone. I thought there was a lot of, I don't want to say excuse making, but providing reasons other than, hey, we need to batten down the hatches here. And everything that Chris just said, by the way, and that Kenny, the thing that Kenny is outlining in those conversations with Chris, that's all true. Like, I think the Cavs have the talent to get to where they need to go, and I think they found the right play style for that talent last year. The question 4 years into this thing remains: why isn't the mathin'? And the responses we got last year were, we need to be tougher, be it mentally, or Kenny always downplays the physical side of it. But then when you say that, and then you say, well, the Pacers were pressing us for 90 feet and our guys got tired, that sounds a little bit physical to me. There's clearly some relation between body and spirit there. And then I asked the question again today to Kenny. You guys all said, including Kenny, I went and watched the Game 5 post-game presser again today to double check this. Kenny was saying, yeah, like, that's one of the next steps for us. We need to get tougher. And then I asked Kenny, what's your role in getting these guys tougher? And he kind of looked at me like I had three heads, and he disagreed with the premise of the question. And he said, I think we're tough enough. We have the character. Now, and then I have a couple of theories on why this could be. I can't tell if I want to write 2,000 words about this today, or if I want to just sit with it. And like, can I catch up, Kenny? Because I think there might have been like a fundamental, maybe he thought I was asking about physical toughness. But then he starts talking about like the makeup of their guys. I don't know. I think there's a couple things here, in fairness, because I don't want two things. I don't want to play gotcha. That's not fun game to play, especially when we're all asking like two questions apiece, and you can cut any sliver of a press conference, frame it a certain way, and make people look bad, right? We're not in the business of doing that here. Number two, I think the timing of some of this stuff matters. When you ask particularly players questions about a loss, fresh off that loss, they are going to still be emotional about it. And it follows that they might attribute some of the reasons they lost to emotion or their management of emotion in those moments and Kenny did the same thing in the immediate aftermath of that loss. 4 months later, you have a lot of time to think big picture. And maybe you think there are other things happening. And also in optimism season, you don't want to come out and say, yeah, our guys played a little soft 4 months ago or didn't handle adversity the right way. This is not the time that a coach wants to say those things. You want to project forward. You want to flush the past. I understand that. There are also legitimate cases, like the Cavs. There are legitimate differences between physical and mental toughness. Darius Garland, DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley all played through injuries during that Pacers series. Objectively, that's tough. The Cavs also blew several double-digit leads, absolutely folded during one of those games when the Pacers hit a run and they blew them out. Objectively, you gotta be mentally tougher in that space. My question today would be, why is the Cavs' first instinct when they're presented with these questions that these aren't coming out of left field? You've been answering them for 4 years now. Why is it still your first instinct to play defense?
Mm-hmm.
When we have these conversations, why is it like, why can't we just acknowledge there's a way to acknowledge, yeah, we have room to grow there without throwing anyone under the bus. I think it's a total natural part of a team's life cycle, potentially. That's the thing that was top of my mind going in. And I think the way, not just Kenny, Koby Altman and Kenny both mentioned, well, it's unfair to question Jarrett Allen's toughness after that last playoff season. The guy just, whatever you want to call it, he's not engaged 100% of the time. And we can talk about the many reasons why that is. You want that to be better. Yeah. The overall tenor, the toughness label got mentioned as unfair a couple of times by Koby during this press. It's not unfair because it keeps happening. You want to say the Knicks were a bad matchup at that time? Sure. You want to say the Pacers were a bad matchup at that time? Sure. You want to say injuries played a role in the last 2 playoff exits? I'll allow all of those things. But at a certain point, let's get some accountability here. And I'm not saying there wasn't zero today. It just, what I heard most of the time today was, we don't need to change. We just need our circumstances to change around us. And that has happened in the Eastern Conference. We'll see. I don't like that.
I completely agree with you, Jimmy. And it's a difficult conversation. It's a difficult thing to say because you go into these press conferences hoping to learn something new, hoping to learn something different, hoping to get confirmation of what you've been believing all summer. And it felt like we just been reiterating the same thing for the entire summer. And it felt like all of those things that we've been talking about on this podcast, writing for cleveland.com, etc., was just explained in a different kind of dance around the question kind of way in today's press conference. And obviously, the one thing that stood out to me, the biggest thing, was how much they talked about Lonzo Ball. Whether it was unprompted, whether it was prompted by a question, Lonzo Ball was the main topic of discussion for today's press conference because of what his impact could be if he remains healthy, whether that be the offense and being able to take over the role of Ty Jerome in the ball handling, the passing, and the scoring off the bench and all these things, but also the defensive acumen that he has to help the defensive identity that they are still trying to foster, trying to get back to. And that was one of my questions to end the interview today, was about whether the Cavs feel like they're a defense first team or not. And the answer, which to my point, kind of danced around, it's both, right? It's a balancing act of both of them. And sure, the answer could be like, you need to be a top 10, top 5 offense and defense to be able to contend in the NBA today. But you also were spewing the identity that you have been having. And when it was asked what your identity was, it was the question again, what do you mean by identity? Right? So I just think it's an interesting topic of discussion when we talk about how we get answers, not only from the organization when we're asking for injury reports and stuff, but also from Kenny Atkinson, the head coach, and president of basketball operations, Koby Altman. So when we talk about Lonzo Ball, how intriguing was it for you guys to see how excited both of these guys were, as we already knew what his potential could be for this team?
Well, I think the big thing is, throughout the course of the offseason, with the minor moves that the Cavs made, I think they're telling you what they think their identity needs to be. Everything that they did this offseason was geared toward fixing or improving the defense. Their defense wasn't good enough against the Indiana Pacers. Their defense, they kept talking about it being their calling card. They kept talking about it being their identity. And they never played to that. They never made decisions like that. They never resembled that kind of team. You felt like there was an opportunity for them to be a top defensive team in the NBA again because of the personnel that they had, some of the personnel that they had. Evan Mobley, Defensive Player of the Year. Jarrett Allen, all defensive team type player. Isaac Okoro, everybody raved about his defense as well. But when they needed it to be great, it was not consistently great against Indiana. And it went beyond Indiana just making a bunch of shots. And it went beyond the Cavs not matching up great from a personnel standpoint with Indiana. And it went beyond the Cavs being a little bit shorthanded in that series against Indiana. And it went beyond all those different things. They added Lonzo Ball in large part because of his defensive acumen. They added Larry Nance Jr. in large part because of his defensive versatility. They talked about Tyrese Proctor and the physical maturity that he's going to gain as his career progresses, but he's ready from a mental standpoint to be like a specific type role player for them. And part of that is on the defensive end of the floor with his ability to guard both guard positions because of his size. So I think they understood that if they want to consider themselves a defensive-minded team, first and foremost, they had to get other components that were going to help them become that. The other thing is, it is clear in talking to a bunch of different people around the organization that there are three guys more than any other. And this doesn't mean that these people that I've been talking to aren't excited about other components of this roster, including guys like Donovan Mitchell, who is a perennial MVP candidate. But there are three guys specifically that when you bring them up and you start talking about their potential with this roster and what they could mean to the team's playoff success, there are three that people get really, really excited about. Like, they just have a different tone in their voice. One of them, obviously, is Evan Mobley. There is a ton of excitement about the next leap that Evan can make as an offensive player. He's going to have the ball in his hands more. They've been working with him in terms of finishing through contact, creating in one-on-one situations, and being more involved in the offensive end of the floor. So that's an obvious one. I mean, this organization has been speaking about Evan Mobley as the one since the minute that he was drafted. And it's not a surprise that when Kenny Atkinson came back from his visit with Evan Mobley in Los Angeles, he told me just talking about Evan and thinking about all the things that he was working on, it gave him goosebumps. The other one is Lonzo Ball for a lot of reasons, but I think the main thing is he's not going to get played off the floor in a playoff environment. They replaced two guys that became unplayable at times in the playoffs, Isaac Okoro and Ty Jerome, with guys that the Cavs do not believe will get played off the floor in a playoff environment, Larry Nance Jr. and Lonzo Ball. But Lonzo, there's so much excitement about the kind of impact that he can make and having like an Alex Caruso type effect on this basketball team, the way that Caruso did for Oklahoma City. And the third one might be a bit of a surprise here. It's Jaylen Tyson. Jaylen Tyson has people in this organization very, very excited about his potential role. I think we're at a point where DeAndre Hunter is going to start. I think he's going to be the starting small forward. I think Kenny believes in him that way. I think Kenny wants DeAndre to play more 3 than 4 this year. And Kenny and DeAndre had a conversation when they were out together in Los Angeles. And one of the topics of that conversation was, would you prefer to start or come off the bench? And I'm told that DeAndre let it be known that he would prefer to start. I don't blame him for that. And Kenny talked earlier today about just, I need to figure out the role for DeAndre. And that is something that he has spent a lot of this offseason really trying to dig into. That's why he had the conversation with DeAndre. That's why he's gone back and he's looked at film and he's looked at stats and he's looked at lineup data and stuff like that. And the lineup data says that the Cavs are a better team offensively and defensively when DeAndre's at the 3 as opposed to at the 4. So I think he's going to try and be more committed to that. And if that's going to be the case, then you start saying, okay, what is the rest of the rotation going to look like? Who's going to help out the bench unit? Who's going to provide scoring? Who's going to provide stability? Who's going to get a bigger opportunity? And Jaylen Tyson's going to get an opportunity. I don't know if it's going to be every single night. I don't know if it's going to be 20 to 25 minutes a night. But there is an excitement coming from this organization about their former first-round pick and the way that he potentially fits into this puzzle, especially when you're talking about playing games at the beginning of the year without both Darius Garland and Max Strus. So those are the three guys that there's just a different tone when talking to people inside this organization and you bring up their names.
So this is the portion of the program, the things you like to hear in the offseason portion of the program, right? We sort of sifted through. I think I'll probably at the end of this little diatribe put it back to things you don't want to hear, but this is good. This is all good, healthy, and organic. Like this is not recycled talking points. These are. I mean, the Evan Mobley development is kind of a recycled talking point, but if there's a new development in that, then heck yeah. Jaylen Tyson, the phrase that caught my ear when Kenny was talking about him is that his skill is playing hard, and I do believe playing hard is a skill in the NBA, and I do believe that will be an extremely useful skill, particularly for a team that is a prime candidate to get caught in regular season malaise because of all the stuff that they have to prove and their inability to prove it in the regular season, as we've discussed ad nauseum. Having a little Energizer Bunny, happy to be here, like this is all new to me kind of guy, Jaylen Tyson. I think that energy will spread across the roster. That's a very good thing. Evan Mobley having more meat on the bone. I want to talk about that more as like a Kenny thing, because the way Evan Mobley being good at basketball, we know this. But the thing about that stood out to me today is just kind of the reframing of Kenny's entry to the team last year, where he's interviewing for, first of all, the Warriors are in the playoffs. Then he's interviewing for jobs, and he's pre-planned to coach the French Olympic team, help coach the French Olympic team while this is happening. So he's trying to build relationships with guys while he's in France. He's texting Donovan Mitchell at odd hours of the night. Kenny said that basically his hair was on fire during that time. And here's a guy, this is, from the player development perspective, this is detailed workout plans, detailed analysis of how players do. The offseason is so huge for that, and you like to have a runway for it. And Kenny just like hopped on the plane as it was jetting off the runway pretty much last year. Now, like guys like DeAndre Hunter, the conversation of should DeAndre Hunter start seems elementary, but another guy who hopped on the plane while it was mid-flight, by the way, last year, harder to do that, right? Evan Mobley is going to get better by X% just by virtue of him being 24 years old, right? And still developing physically and developing more basketball skill. But with Kenny's keen eye for both marrying skills I think you can be good at and the schematic ways we plan on using you, like that's a different layer that is easier to implement after a year of being with this person than it is. And this sounds obvious, but I think the difference is evident when you say the two things out loud. Full season spent with Evan Mobley, then a full off season of detailed workout plans versus, hey, I'm flying here from France and I think you're pretty good. So what do you think? It's obviously it was more involved than that last year, but listen to it. Like, I think that can make a huge difference for a guy like Evan Mobley and guys across the roster. Just apply that to anyone across the roster because this is Kenny's bread and butter. So I definitely think there's a possible, like almost a second year one bump for some of these guys skill wise, just because Kenny has had more time to invest in them by virtue of the calendar, how it worked out last year. Okay. We like all this stuff. Lonzo Ball is Alex Caruso. I like that comparison. Larry Nance Jr. I think he's got the playoff makeup. Now stuff you don't want to hear. Alex Caruso has played at least 50 games in 5 of 6 seasons. Lonzo Ball's played 70 combined the last 4 years. Just those two things right there make it hard for me to get there. I think they're comparable as players when they're playing basketball. Obviously, we know that that's a problem for Lonzo Ball. And I can totally envision this time next year there being it was unfortunate that we didn't have Lonzo in X round. And if I can say that now, you don't get to say it next year. Like, there, as awesome as Lonzo Ball can be, the transaction is basically a win no matter what, because we thought they were going to have to attach an asset to Isaac Okoro's contract to get off of it. They got a potentially useful player in return. It's a win. If Lonzo Ball struggles with injuries again, I will stand on that in May. That being said, this Lonzo, it's a huge if-then thing, and it's a risk. It's a risk. We don't know what other potential packages were out there for an Isaac Okoro type trade, but the Lonzo Ball thing is a risk, okay? Larry Nance Jr., as a proven playoff guy, I mean, since the core four has been together, all these guys have played more playoff games than him. Most of Larry Nance Jr.'s playoff experience is when he played with the cobbled together on the fly LeBron James team, the last one that made the finals, that is maybe LeBron's finest work, that he got that team to the finals, given the lack of secondary creation, given the way it was thrown together the last second. And Larry Nance Jr., I think, held his own admirably given his circumstances, but he has told us since then that he didn't feel like he was quite ready for those moments. He's played 10 whole playoff games since then. I like Larry Nance Jr. as a basketball player, and as a dude, I just want to see more on that front. But again, mostly, I think I'm can sometimes my ear catches the contrarian notes, or I just want to make sure that we're not just parroting offseason optimism, but some of this offseason optimism is totally real and fair and worth getting excited about.
Jimmy, you kind of got into it there, and the injury bug that continues to bite the Cleveland Cavaliers, whether that is Jarrett Allen having a pierced rib 2 years ago against Orlando Magic, or last season when DeAndre Hunter, Darius Garland, and Evan Mobley had to sit out game 2, right? So the other part of this, and we've continued to talk about this summer, is the fact that the Cavs need to be healthy when it comes time for the playoffs. Not necessarily when they get to the playoffs, the best team wins, but likely the healthiest team does, right? So when we talk about this Cavs team, there were some concerns of injury bug and how they were going about this summer. What I was hoping to learn more of today was a significant plan that was being set in place, but obviously Kenny Atkinson and Koby Altman were going to just hand that over to us. But one thing that did catch my ear was the fact that Koby Altman said that Donovan Mitchell, who didn't have a sporadic injury, has been dealing with a calf injury for the last 2 postseasons, is in midseason form. It's September. Jimmy, we kind of talked about this on a previous podcast, the fact that Donovan Mitchell is doing a great thing by getting in work with going to Louisville, going to his camps, and getting in runs with these college and high school prospect kids, but also the wear and tear that has on your body way earlier than maybe you wanted it to be. And Koby Altman specifically said that he is in midseason form right now, and we need him to be peaking at the end of the season. But he also mentioned saving Donovan Mitchell from himself in September. That might have been the most concerning thing I heard from today's press conference, because of what we know Donovan Mitchell is going to have to do at the beginning of the season, particularly without Max Strus and Darius Garland, but also understanding what his role is going to be come playoff time. And especially if Lonzo Ball is going to be playing maybe 17 to 22 minutes a night, because you're not going to play him starters minutes to start the season, what that's going to look like for the wear and tear on Donovan's body already before we even get to the start of the year. What do you guys think about this situation that we're in and Donovan Mitchell and what was said about his health, and obviously it being in great shape now, but what it could mean for the playoffs come 2025, 2026?
I think the first thing on this, guys, is that I think in the early portion of the season, with Darius still recovering from his toe surgery and Max Strus being sidelined because of his fractured foot, I don't think it's just going to be a situation of, okay, Donovan, you're the primary ball handler, you're the primary creator, you're the main source of offense, or you're the only source of offense. I think logic tells you that Donovan is going to move over to the point guard spot. But how the Cavs run their offense and how much they put on the shoulders of Donovan and how much he's on the ball versus off the ball, I think that is going to be subtly different. And I think that's part of the reason why they're going to go with DeAndre in the starting lineup. I think you can run stuff through DeAndre. You can put him in the post. You can put him at the elbow. You can have him face up. You can just have him do a little bit more. You can give him more of the responsibility on the offensive end when Darius isn't out there dominating possessions. Darius, by all intents and purposes, is going to be replaced by Sam Merrill. That's a completely different type of player. Stylistically, Sam's going to be off the ball. Sam's going to be running around screens. He's going to be doing some DHO stuff with Evan Mobley. It's just a different kind of approach offensively. So there's more room for somebody like DeAndre when Darius and Donovan aren't out there together. And there's going to be more room for Evan Mobley. And I think that's the way that the Cavs are going to approach the loss of Darius. Like, yeah, Donovan's going to shift over to point guard. Donovan's going to have responsibilities of bringing the ball up the floor and getting them into their sets and initiating offense. And there's going to be more of an opportunity for somebody like Craig Porter Jr. in the rotation coming off the bench. And all of that stuff is the no-duh stuff. You just look at the depth chart and you say, okay, guys are going to move up. Guys are going to get a bigger opportunity. Guys are going to change their roles slightly. But how the Cavs are going to go about things on the offensive end, they're not just going to say, okay, Donovan, be Superman. It's going to be, okay, Evan, more opportunity, more touches, more shot attempts, different kinds of ways to have you get us into our offense. You be more of an offensive hub. Donovan off the ball, Evan on the ball. Create for yourself, create for your teammates. There's going to be, like I said, more room, more freedom for somebody like DeAndre Hunter. So I think it's going to be a little bit of Evan, a little bit more of DeAndre, a little bit of Lonzo coming off the bench, a little bit of Craig Porter Jr. It's not just going to be Donovan, your usage rate goes to 35 to 40% because we don't have Darius at the beginning of the year. And I think that's a really, really important thing when you look at the roster construction. Having different sources of reliable offense consistently, that is important to the evolution of this basketball team, especially when you get into a 7-game playoff series. And it allows Kenny to tap into those things. It allows Kenny to get comfortable with those things. It allows the other players on the team to get comfortable in some of those expanded roles. The other thing is, I don't know what the right answer is when it comes to Donovan and just like managing him throughout the course of the regular season, because I think there are two ways to look at it. I think there's similar to what the Cavs did last year, low minutes, not as much usage during the regular season, bigger picture in mind. But there's also this idea of, if we get into a 7-game series against New York, Denver on the other side, Oklahoma City on the other side, we need a Donovan Mitchell that can be effective if he plays 44 minutes a night. We need an effective Donovan Mitchell if we have to push his minutes to 40, 42, 44, like I said, 46, hell, 48. You know what I mean? Like, when you get into these playoff series, you ask more of your stars. But if Donovan's not conditioned to be that kind of guy because of the way that they approach the regular season, then that becomes a problem. So I think you have to balance it. And I don't know what the right answer is. I thought the Cavs did so much right when it came to their regular season and managing minutes and giving these guys time off. And then it still became a problem for them. Injuries did once they got into the postseason, and then conditioning became a problem for them. And then just dealing with the 94 feet and the all-out intensity and the pace of the Indiana Pacers. And I know that not everybody is Indiana, and not everybody presents the same kinds of problems. But you want to get into a situation where if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's playing 46 minutes, like, that's a big deal for Oklahoma City. That's a big advantage for Oklahoma City. Less time with their star player off the floor. Or Tyrese Halliburton's playing 42 minutes, or Jason Tatum is capable of playing 44 and being effective in that. Can Donovan play 44 and be that level of effective? I think it remains to be seen. So I don't know the right way to manage this. I don't know the right way to approach this for the Cavs. I do know that they've done a lot of studies. I do know that they've done a lot of soul searching. I do know that they've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different people to try to find the right answer to this and try to find the right balance. And I don't know that they have the ideal plan. I think they felt like they approached it the right way last year, and it just didn't work for them.
Yeah, Kobe underlined that today. Said that we had a good plan for the guys last year, and then unfortunately, stuff popped up. It is unfortunate. The Pacers might have been a bad matchup, but like, I'll say it again: Pacers bad matchup, Celtics unlucky injuries, Knicks bad matchup. Good teams win independent of how good or bad the matchup is. They dictate what kind of matchup it is. And by the way, if you're a championship contending team, you find a way to last longer than 5 games. unless than ideal circumstances, right? I think that's all pretty fair to say. In conjunction with the Cavs have had some bad lucks, some bad breaks the last couple years as it pertains to Donovan. We'll talk conditioning first. As Chris was talking, I was thinking about what's the flip side of this. So clearly, what I'm inferring from this Donovan stuff about him being in midseason playing shape right now is that Donovan thinks if I condition my body as much as I possibly can, and I come in the best shape of my career, that gives me the best chance to last as long as I need to throughout the regular season and then peak in the playoffs. I'm thinking of guys like Luka Doncic, who he's on a hot bod world tour this summer too, so maybe he's reevaluating. But to this point, Luka Doncic's approach has generally been, I'm going to show up. I've had a few beers this summer, and I'm going to play myself into shape. I might miss 15 to 20 regular season games, but by playoff time, I'll be in shape because I will have played a full season of NBA basketball. And I feel like, I don't know, that kind of has worked. Like LeBron was always in shape, but he wasn't always giving it his all during the regular season. There's bits and pieces. I don't think we'll ever truly figure out some of it is luck. Some of it, I am a little worried that Kobe's already saying, to Ethan's point, like we need to save him from himself because to our earlier conversation about this beginning of the season stretch being an egalitarian type plan, I wonder if part of Donovan's commitment to conditioning is in anticipation of knowing that guys are going to be out and understanding that at minimum there will be an increased ball handling ask, table setting ask of him, if not also doing superstar stuff at the regular season to keep this team afloat, because that is the crux of this push-pull, right? Like it's Donovan's team until Donovan feels comfortable giving the reins to Evan. But for him to do that, Evan needs to prove that he's capable of taking the reins. But for him to take the reins, Donovan needs or what do we chicken or the egg kind of situation. What should be, I think, is what Chris said. This beginning of the season where Darius and even Max does a lot of organization and table setting, his 2-man game with Jarrett Allen. I would like to see DeAndre Hunter try to replicate that. That sounds like a good idea to me. I would like Evan just have the ball, even if it results in bad offense. We talked about this last year. Let Evan take some bad shots. Let Evan force some things now in October and November, so that when we get to April and May, he knows what is within his purview, what he feels comfortable doing when he has the ball late in the shot clock, or when Donovan Mitchell is tired and gives him the ball late in the shot clock, when he is going to be, a trusted source. DeAndre Hunter, same thing. I love this arc that we're on with DeAndre Hunter getting a full training camp. Kenny Atkinson completely changing his tune just based on what DeAndre, remember last year was all, DeAndre's rhythm as a sixth man. That's what we like about having him come off the bench. DeAndre Hunter says, I want to start. Okay, he's starting. Great. That sounds great. I like that. I like making him feel comfortable, particularly after Ty Jerome leaves and he feels like maybe more of a man on an island. I like Kenny talking about, because he's an introvert, it will take more time to build trust. That is another part of Kenny's coaching acumen, is understanding people. Putting him in the starting lineup when there's absences in the starting lineup will help DeAndre Hunter get more involved in this offense. This is great. I think Jarrett Allen, there's a Jarrett Allen piece in here. Like, Jarrett Allen should just get 4 or 5 more lobs a game. He might not catch them all, just throw them. Or you might get a few more touches at the elbow. He might not make the right decision every time. Just give it to him. We're developing everyone on the fly until Darius and Max get healthy, and then the Cavs try to take their actual shape. But all of this hinges on, maniacally competitive, hyper aware of where he is in his career. Like, this is Donovan's, Ethan and I did a pod on this. This is like it. This is Donovan's moment to write his legacy, is the next 2-3 years of his career. That's, these peaks come and go pretty quickly sometimes. So this is his moment. He's going to put a lot of pressure on himself to change the trajectory of this franchise. But we all know that the trajectory of this franchise also depends on his willingness to take a step back. And I think that's an interesting rub there.
Jimmy, there you mentioned Jarrett Allen and his impactfulness, obviously, and needing him to be engaged, right? That's the conversation we've had throughout the summer, especially with how his offensive production kind of translates to what happens on the defensive end and how the Cavs need him to be at the top of his game defensively for the entire game that he's on the floor, rather than just in bits and pieces. Today, Kenny Atkinson kind of talked about how that was another kind of deep dive for the summer of how to get Jarrett Allen more acclimated, how to get him to be used better in the offensive system, especially when talking about 5-out lineups, whether it's the offensive or defensive end, and also just going into different specifics for this team. When you guys talk about the core four, obviously Jarrett Allen gets pushed out a little bit further than the importance of Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, and Donovan Mitchell. But Jarrett Allen is still a linchpin of this team, and especially when you talk about the defensive end. How important do you guys think it is for him to be as appreciated as necessary for them to get further in the playoffs? Because we focus a lot on the first three of the core four, but I still think that Jarrett Allen is pivotal to what the Cavs are going to do, especially when we talk about backing up Evan Mobley, even though it's been said that Evan Mobley's gotten stronger and could potentially handle more of the center minutes this coming season.
Look, Jarrett remains a core member of this team, and he's not Donovan Mitchell in terms of importance. He's not Evan Mobley in terms of importance, but he is important to their success. He has been a barometer for their success. He's a winning player. And I think all the Cavs need from Jarrett is him to be at his best, engaged, effective when you get into a 7-game environment. When you talk about the playoff series, or as Koby Altman likes to say, the 16-game season, he doesn't have to score 20 points a game. He doesn't have to expand his game to the 3-point line. He just has to continue. I hate this phrase because it's so overused, but it's true. He just has to be a star in his role. He's got to rebound. He's got to bring toughness. He's got to anchor the defense. He's got to protect the rim. He's got to set menacing screens on the offensive end of the floor. He's got to be a lob threat. He's got to be, as I said, engaged. And he's got to understand what playoff level intensity is and what playoff level physicality is. And he's got to match that. That's what the Cavs need from Jarrett Allen. They don't need him to be the best center in the Eastern Conference. They just need him to be a winning player, something that he has been for a majority of the time that he's been here and since the Cavs acquired him. But they need him. I don't think this team is better without Jarrett Allen. I think the things that he does, the way that he impacts the game, sometimes get overlooked, and that's unfortunate. But everybody has a different role in a championship being won. And it's not going to be as expansive as Evan Mobley's. It's just not. And he has to understand that, and he has to be okay with that. And I think he is. So as long as they get an active, engaged Jarrett who is doing the little things that sometimes don't show up in the box score, then he can be a big-time asset for this organization.
And as we wrap up this podcast, of course, as we're talking about Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson, Koby Altman reportedly makes a move, acquiring Thomas Bryant a week before training camp and filling the 14th roster spot for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And guys, I've been saying all offseason that the Cavs needed another backup big for this team, especially behind Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. Jimmy, I just want to get your thoughts on this acquisition because I think this helps out the depth a whole lot, especially when you talk about Thomas Bryant being 6'10", 248 pounds. And even though they went and got Larry Nance Jr., who's 6'8", and 245 pounds, we know that Larry Nance Jr. is more of a 4 than a 5. And I believe Thomas Bryant can play the 5 in minutes necessary to help out, especially during the regular season for this Cavs roster.
I mean, we know that Larry Nance Jr. thinks he's more of a 4 than a 5. And I think the Cavs just solidified that by grabbing Thomas Bryant, although we'll see in the playoffs as a five man that isn't Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen, I'd probably still lean Larry Nance Jr. over Thomas Bryant. Talk about minutia we don't need to debate right now. That is number one among the list. But all right, Thomas Bryant, energetic player, good offensive rebounder, good decent rebounder in general, better offensive rebounder than defensive rebounder, gives you optionality as someone who can, in theory, stretch the floor from the 5 spot. Will run the floor, in on days where one of Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley are not in the lineup. But I think him and Lonzo Ball could be a fun transition duo. He obviously comes from the Indiana Pacers where they ran. So he knows that a play is never dead if you're a big man, as long as you're running. That's good. The bad defense as an anchor, Thomas Bryant is not that. He is attackable and will be attacked if he has a role in the playoffs, which we'll see. It's the 14th roster spot. He will be attacked in the playoffs by other team, even in the regular season at times. Like he's somebody that sticks out and they'll go after. But this is still a Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley focused defense. Those are the actual anchors. Basically, long and short of it, Thomas Bryant's an NBA player. If you can get a real NBA player that can contribute in a real way with your 14th roster spot, I'm on board with it. But I in terms of that doesn't shift my idea of a rotation. No. Does it shift the shape of anything in the roster? I think Thomas Bryant can fit here. But I think the Cavs, it's a 14th roster spot at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the other thing is this is a guy who's been in a lot of different situations throughout the course of his career and with a lot of different teams. So I think he understands some nights I'm going to play, some nights I'm not going to play. And that was his role in Indiana. And I don't think he's going to chirp about a lack of playing time. I think he's going to recognize that Jarrett Allen is a big member of this team, an important member of this team. And same thing with Evan Mobley, and he's behind both those guys on the depth chart. And I think part of something that we talked about with filling this roster out is you have to find guys who understand their role, who are going to be accepting of their role, and who can thrive in what may be a limited role. If there's an injury and you have to go to Thomas Bryant to fill up center minutes, you could do a lot worse than him. So I think this is a good spot for him, and I think it's the right way to approach this particular spot for the Cavs as well.
And just so we are clear, the 14th roster spot being filled by Thomas Bryant officially kind of brings to a close the tenure of Tristan Thompson with the Cleveland Cavaliers.
The Cavs are not signing 15. I can tell you that much. It's only going to be 14. They do have another two-way that they still need to fill. But for the full-time NBA roster, they can sign 15. They're not going to. That is not happening.
Right, because one, we know that to be kind of their MO for the last couple of years, and keeping that open keeps the door open for buyout contracts, for sign-in trades, and all these different things when it comes to the regular season of the 2025-2026 year. But we just covered a whole lot when it comes to the Cavs and when it comes to the kind of initiation of the 2025-2026 season for the Cleveland Cavaliers after talking with Kenny Atkinson and Koby Altman this morning. But I hope you guys tuned into all that, and we'll keep you updated as we go into Media Day next week and then training camp, where Chris will be traveling to IMG Academy and getting all the insight there as well. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Have any questions that you want answered on the pod? This is where you can send them in. Or we can just talk about everything that we discussed today and beyond. So to do so, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.